now for 20 years. I learned the executive recruiting business from my friend, and then by about 2006, I decided it was time for me to be totally on my own, and went out as a sole proprietor of my executive search firm. About the same time, I started getting more clients that were private equity groups, and they were looking to me to help them find CEOs and CFOs. And as you know, with any private equity group, when they do a transaction and buy a business, depending on the transaction, the CEO may or may not stay with the business.
Sure.
But the CFO is always changed out. You know, they always want their own CFO. So I was doing those searches for the private equity group, and then for their portfolio companies, I was doing other C-level searches for like chief development officer, CIOs, chief marketing officers. And then another little trend started developing where my more traditional Fortune 500 clients started asking for consultants and project managers and coaches. I mean, one of them even asked me to do a very quick in and out assignment, and said, okay, that's fine. And so what I was doing was, in addition to the executive search work, I was putting people that I knew into these freelance consulting situations, 1099. And then in 2008, the recession hit, and we had the market was just inundated by highly compensated corporate folks that were, they were let go through reorganizations, obviously, so companies could reduce their overhead and become more profitable. And because of a lot of regulations and everything, a lot of employers weren't so anxious to hire, and add to staff, especially more highly compensated baby boomer types. So you had a whole supply of potential freelance consultants and a whole demand of employers that were looking for an option other than a W-2 or a full-time employee. So all of a sudden, I was in the middle of the market, and that part of the business just really expanded. Then by 2014, a group of us decided that we needed to make our business a little bit more substantial, and so we branded it and got a website, started promoting, and became a more significant entity, still under the umbrella of my executive search brand. And then, so the recession eventually plays out. Now, 10 years later, though, unemployment's really low, but we still have a lot of people that are moving out of the corporate world, either through reorganizations or due to whatever reason, including mergers and acquisitions, or you've got baby boomers that have just decided that it's time to do something different.
Right.
So that demand for an alternative to a full-time equivalent has continued, and the supply of people willing to do freelance work has increased. And my job is essentially to connect the two ends of the equation and make a market.
And you've really, it's a fascinating business model, but you have really been executive matchmaking for all your career, basically.
More or less.
Or
right.
Your post-corporate career,
right.
I should say. Right. Yeah.
As I tell people, my job is to put good people into great jobs.
Sure.
Whether it's a 1099 or a W-2 or whatever.
Right. We're speaking with Jim Weber, and Jim is the managing partner of ITB Partners. Tell us about some of your more successful engagements.
Well, one of our most interesting and successful engagement is a startup right here in Atlanta called Sage Chefs. Sage was created by two former Silicon Valley engineers that had a pretty good track record there, and they had a new idea for providing home meal replacement, like Blue Apron and those kinds of competitors that was more flexible for the consumer. So using their technology and their algorithms, they were able to modify the recipes of whatever they offered during a week or two, so that people could essentially have it their way. So, stealing from Burger King, they would either adjust the spice level if people wanted something less spicy, or add to it, or change the particular item to fit the consumer's needs more, which in the restaurant business or the food service business is very challenging. So they first brought one of our consultants in as a chief financial officer, fractional CFO. She later came to me with help finding somebody that could help them with purchasing and supply chain, and then ultimately a really strong operations person. So what happened over a period of time is that my CFO ended up taking a full-time position with another one of her clients. The operations director that we put in there did such a great job. They gradually elevated him to the point now he's the CEO for the business, still on a 1099. So he's a fractional CEO growing that business. That's one of our most interesting success stories, I think.
Wow.
So we're really proud of that one. They're still in business, and they deliver fully cooked meals, refrigerated, I think once a week, and mostly to people that are too busy to cook their own meal, or actually they're taking them into work and using the microwave to heat up the meal for work.
Now, it occurs to me as you tell that story, Jim, that you really mitigate risk for a corporate client that's looking to solve a problem, because there's a lot of movement potentially with that fractional C-suite person that they might want to hire. That person may get attractive to somebody else, and then they're left high and dry, and you really help mitigate risk. That's
exactly right. As a matter of fact, in that last example with Sage Chefs, the CFO did take a full-time job with a client of hers, but we had all the support by virtue of about 8 or 10 other fractional CFOs that could move right into position. And so they never missed a beat. I mean, everything just continued rather smoothly. And that is one of the biggest questions that a prospective client has when they're talking to any independent consultant. If you're a one-off, then they're looking across the table and thinking, well, what happens if you get a full-time job? Or what happens if you get sick? Or what happens if you, for one reason or another, are not able to complete the assignment? Am I going to be sitting there with a half-finished product and have to start all over again? So ITB Partners has 9 different practice groups, and we've got depth to support every one of our consultants. So if our consultant is asked that question, and they have been asked that question.
Of course. It's a good question.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
And as a matter of fact, one of our founding members was asked that question when he was talking to a Fortune 500 prospective client. She said, well, I see you're Stout and Associates. He said, that's right. And she said, well, do you have associates?
That's a great question.
He said, absolutely. I'm part of ITB Partners, and here's all the
the
people that can do the same work that I do, and so all of a sudden the risk factor is nullified, and then you're on to other discussion.
Absolutely. In fact, it kind of shifts the other way, right? I mean, it really creates a backup for that individual that's unexpectedly pleasant.
Exactly.
To that client.
Exactly. Well, not only that, what we find is that when one of our consultants is on an engagement, they're doing a great job, they actually become a trusted advisor. The client will come to them and ask, hey, do you know somebody that can help me with this other problem? And let's say it's, I'm working on a accounting engagement, and they have an issue with their marketing, or they're human resources or some other function, then we've got people that we can, introduce them to, multiples, so that they can have a chance to talk to those people individually, assess whether or not their skill sets will fit what their needs, or if they have the kind of personality that would fit with their management style and their culture, which is also, very important. So we were able to help minimize the risk to our clients across a whole range of, issues.
Sure. Makes sense. Again, folks, we're speaking with Jim Weber, and he's the managing partner of ITB Partners. Now, I've got to, as we move toward wrapping things up here, I've got to ask about how the charges work. So if let's say I'm a consultant, want to be part of your group, you're a membership organization?
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
Okay.
So at this point, we have an annual membership fee that is very reasonable. As we work to, enhance our brand to get more market share, I'm trying to make it very difficult for the right people to say no. So that's why the pricing model is attractive to those folks. However, we don't take anything off the top of any of our consultants' revenue. So that's another big benefit compared to a lot of other companies out there that are doing something similar.
Sure.
So whatever they are able to contract with their client, they get 100% of that. But the other thing that we've incentivized all of our members to work together and open doors for each other, and actually to help increase their revenue, is by virtue of a referral fee program. So if one of our fractional CFOs brings in a fractional chief marketing officer, or maybe a human resources person to work on an engagement, then they'll do an arm's length transaction with the client. And if they do a deal, then the fractional CFO who has the engagement will be entitled to a referral fee from that person. So that's another good way for us to really energize our business development function, because all the consultants are out there looking for opportunities, not just for themselves, but for all the other members of ITB Partners.
Sure. That sounds great. Well, Jim, this has been fascinating, quite an interesting business model. So for those that would like to be in touch, whether there may be a independent consultant that wants to potentially join your group, or a corporate client, how do they get in touch with you?
Well, my email address would probably be the best way, and that is jim.weber, Weber has one B, at itbpartners.com.
Great. Jim Weber, ITB Partners. He's the managing partner there and founder of ITB Partners. Thanks for being with us.
Well, thank you, John. I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, glad to have you.